Okay, so check this out. If you were a kid in the 90s, I bet this is the one thing that you had on your Christmas list, which, unless you were a rich kid, like the Deviant historian, you probably never got. But this is the mother lode here. This is a portable television, analog, of course, and it's an Axion brand. And we'll turn this baby on. See that? Nothing but a blank screen now because the digital switch.
And I think up until a couple years ago, you could get a Christian station still on here. KFXB still broadcasts in analog because it's subject to the digital transition regulatory requirements. So you could still get one station on here, I remember. But that's all kind of changed there. But you can see the VHF and UHF frequencies. And what's interesting, you remember KFXA and KFXB, Fox 28 and 40. They're on the UHF frequencies there. And UHF, wasn't that the name of the station for Weird Al Yankovic's?
Yes,
Okay.
and they're considered lower quality transmission.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to be the smaller stations. I remember I'm pretty sure it was like '05 or '06 though, because I remember back then, like it was right around that time that we had to get like a fucking adapter or
Yeah.
something, and about out on the farm, which I hate digital television. Analog was way better. I would much prefer analog, and here's why. Digital TV is completely binary. It either works or it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't. Like,
Yep.
and there, I can't count the number of times in the years since where you turn on the TV, it's a bunch of pixelated bullshit. It's like not even you're getting a mixture of the one station and the other station. See, you've never had to actually live with it. See, in reality, it's much worse. Like analog was a lot better because even when the picture wasn't perfect and the
Yeah.
sound wasn't perfect, you could at least watch the show and it was coherent. Whereas if digital TV isn't working, it's just a bunch of gobbledygook. You can't make heads or tails of it. If you're watching analog, at least if there is a little bit of static and if the picture is a little fuzzy, at least you can still watch the fucking program. But at any rate, this is the era that TV is from. And I really wanted one of these. Honestly, I mean, as a 90s kid, I was all about television. Television was my life. The internet didn't really exist yet in the form that we know. Um, Google came out in, I think it was 97, wasn't it?
I think so.
96 or 97, Google.
98, I think. So it's not even 20 years yet.
Yeah.
It was
Was
recent.
Google the very first search engine?
No, there was like Dogpile and Yahoo and
So there were search engines, but
Alta Vista. That was a big deal.
and AOL was around, but the internet was nothing like. Not as many people had computers. It just television was still king, and
Google was actually going to originally be part of Stanford. It was going to be a nonprofit. It wasn't even going to be a for-profit enterprise.
yeah, yeah. So there isn't a whole lot to say about this except that it's just really cool. It's basically a '90s kid's wet dream. You could go out camping and still watch all of your weeknight shows. I could, be out in the middle of the woods and still watch Third Rock from the Sun or whatever. That is if I had this thing, which I wasn't lucky enough to have. But
And I
yeah,
really didn't use it much. I got it, I think, almost near the time the digital was coming, and it was pretty discounted. It might have been like $50. I don't really remember.
and the thing would have been completely useless
In a couple years.
after that point.
Yeah, so it wasn't.
Unfortunately. But yeah, and then you have it has this cool stand thing, so you can have it on your desk at work on a slow day or just don't feel like working. If you work at the DMV or something, you'd watch TV.
Drift in and out of consciousness.
Drift in and out of consciousness. You could have it has a telescopic antenna. These things are really cool. Here, I'll have you pull that. Yep, telescopic antenna. Those tend to work pretty well. Well, actually, they don't, but they're cool though. They look cool and they're fun to play with. But
So going on about more of the analog to digital technology, there's really three types of technology that are that are used to broadcast television signals. So The oldest is really analog, and that came out around the 1940s. And it was really black and white in that it was. And then in the 50s, they kind of tried to get color going, but it really didn't really happen much then.
Here's the sad thing. Well, here's a couple of factoids about television that a lot of people don't know. The first country to have television on a wide scale was actually Germany in the 1930s. They were early adopters of television, and it was mostly a Nazi plot to basically turn televisions into propaganda machines that all good Germans would have in their homes. And Germany was actually a very early adopter of television technology, except in their case, it was basically a telescreen, except one that obviously wasn't a camera, it wasn't looking into people's homes, but it was broadcasting things into people's homes and spreading propaganda and stuff. So it was something that it's a tool that the Nazis utilized very, very early. Another interesting fact about television is that in the 1960s, color came out in full force. I believe there was a type of color television that was it wasn't real color television. It was like a screen that you could put over your television screen. It was like a plastic thing that kind of gave the illusion of color. Like if you put it was like a tinted plastic film that you put over the black and white TV, and it kind of made it look like it was in color, but it wasn't actual. It was kind of like a sort of a cheap imitation of color television. But then real color television and real color TVs came out in the 60s, and they made a big deal out of that. And it actually got to the point where, unfortunately, networks they kind of threw out the baby with the bathwater in that they thought that color television was the only thing anybody was ever going to want to see. So they actually started not wanting to run reruns of black and white shows anymore. And in some cases, unfortunately, they actually threw them away. They threw away the original films of certain television shows, not classic shows like Rocky and Bullwinkle or The Twilight Zone or Gunsmoke. Actually, I think some Gunsmoke episodes are lost. I could be wrong about that. But a lot of those long-running serial television shows that were just kind of throwaway anyway, and even a few that weren't, they actually threw those away, and they're not available now. If you try to look for them on DVD or online to download, you cannot find them because they were actually thrown away because TV executives at the time were like, well, the public has color now. They're not going to want to watch this old shit. And it was pretty short-sighted because a lot of that stuff was still classic TV, and it was historically significant, but they threw it away because they thought that the public wouldn't want to see black and white anymore. They didn't stop to think that, hey, maybe that stuff people still like and still has some value, because I mean, to this day, people still watch old black and white movies and TV shows, reruns. So, but for some reason, they thought that, oh well, that means that black and white TV is just over and done forever. It was a pretty short-sighted thing that they did.
So a couple of other things with the history there. There's a book that I had read. It said 1954, the best year of television, because right after World War II until about 1953, there was a freeze on FCC licenses. So if you look at KCRG or WMT, which is now KGAN, those two stations, they both launched in 1953. So really, that was the first year. That was kind of like the imagery and the television of, the startups of the internet, kind of.
It was when television became a kind of an official thing,
Yeah.
I would say. However, there wasn't a whole lot on.
No.
I wouldn't say it wasn't. I would say it wasn't until like the early to mid '60s that television really started to become worth watching.
Yeah.
But it definitely was. The mid '50s were kind of the incubus of television, and it was kind of when everybody realized, oh, this isn't just a fad. This is something that's going to be around long term, like the internet or like anything else, or like radio at the time.
Well, and that ties into another thing too. ABC, NBC, and those three stations, ABC, NBC, and CBS, those three stations were all originally radio stations. So CBS was Columbia Broadcast System. It was a radio network. NBC is National Broadcast Company. It was was tied in the RCA, which made radios too. They're a radio company, and NBC had NBC Red and NBC Blue, and I believe the NBC Blue stations are what were spun off by antitrust legislation or rulings or whatever that created the ABC television network. Because there was always really just 3 networks for quite a while, really until PBS, took effect. Dumont is another kind of interesting company. It started off in the 40s, went bankrupt by the 50s, and it tried to compete against these guys, but it just didn't have the infrastructure and the network in place to be successful. And then one other thing, when you mentioned the Hitler Network, I was thinking about that with Nazi Germany. How much of what is currently television content is propaganda and fake news and agenda pushing? Like, if you look at MSNBC versus Fox News, aren't they just kind of panhandling to a certain niche and just kind of propaganda for their own parties?
I would agree with that, but I would argue that the worst of all is CNN, because CNN claims to be impartial.
Clinton News Network.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like Fox News and MSNBC, they're pretty upfront about the fact that they're biased. But CNN tries, they basically try to carry that torch of integrity that they don't deserve.
No.
For me, CNN is the one that annoys me the most. MSNBC and Fox is like, okay, at least they're honest somewhat about what they're doing.
Yeah.
So I don't mind them so much. But all cable news is shit, and corporate network news is almost as bad. They all basically helped Trump get elected by propping up Hillary Clinton and downplaying Bernie Sanders and overlooking all the corruption and trying to frame it all after the election as something that Russia did, when in reality
they did it on themselves.
They did it on themselves. The only people who really interfered in the 2016 election were the DNC. They did it to themselves. I don't. Even if Russia did hack it, it's nothing new. Countries interfere in each other's elections all the time. The real focus should be on what the DNC did and why they did it and why it was wrong. And so, fuck all the Russia bullshit. In all honesty, the DNC can go fuck themselves. They've pretty much ensured that I'm never going to vote Democrat ever again. I supported Bernie Sanders. There was a good chance I was going to vote third party anyway, even if he had gotten nominated. But I was actually contemplating voting for him because I thought he was a nice, straightforward guy. Wasn't even so much that I agreed with him on the issues. It's just this guy's not a corrupt, neo-conservative, fascist, potentially murdering asshole. And so I supported him. But then when I saw how badly he got screwed over, it's like, that's it. I'm voting third party from now on, and Democrats can eat my dick. So that's all, and that's all there is to it.
Huh.
So yeah. So anyway, So TV news isn't such a great thing.
So yeah,
and even TV shows. They've kind of become spineless.
Lowest common denominator, and it's a race to the bottom. It's all garbage TV. It's Honey Boo Boo and Kardashians.
It's either a bunch of reality. It's either a bunch of reality TV, or it's a bunch of kind of quirky fictional shows that don't really reflect real life, because network TV and to a certain extent cable TV, but I would say network TV more so. They're more kind of concerned with sort of pleasing their audience and political correctness than they are with actually portraying reality. And yeah, I would say that art that doesn't portray reality the way it is propaganda.
This has been
by definition,
This has been a really fun video too, and there's still more stuff I'd want to add to it, but I think you made a good point about looking beyond just an us versus them mindset and looking at alternatives and options. And actually, cable to some extent, there's basic cable. A lot of that stuff's just funded through subscriber fees. Everybody who subscribes to cable subsidizes Fox News with at least $1 of fees or whatever. CNN, that network you were talking about, they don't even get the ratings to justify being around. They wouldn't be around if it wasn't for subscriber fees.
Yeah, because they're included in the package.
Yeah,
they don't even justify their own existence. They're pretty much subsidized.
They're just subsidized there. Ted Turner's a cool guy, but he's ultra liberal, and he did start like TBS, TNT.
Well, also he hasn't been involved in
for decades.
He's pretty much been retired for like over a decade.
20 years, probably. It's been a long time. He sold out for billions of dollars. I like TCM. I do like TCM. I do like PBS. I like commercial-free movie channels. I feel like services like Showtime and HBO, they're not pussies. They actually put some good content on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I get those different networks and stuff, and I think that a lot of them, when they don't have commercial subscribers and when they actually have to do some decent content, they can survive without all the bullshit. But I don't know. So it's interesting, the amount of emotions, the amount of history and context.
This has been a very healing video. I hope the country can move on now and work together, to create a better future. And I listen to make things very clear. I'm not a fan of Donald Trump. I blame the mainstream media for actually helping him get elected. So I don't want that to be misinterpreted. They actually helped him get elected by propping up Hillary Clinton, who they knew was a shitty candidate. I voted third party, so I just want that on the record, and I will from now on. I actually had in 3/4 of the presidential elections I had voted in. In 2004, voted for Nader. Probably pissed a lot of people off, but I did anyway, and I don't regret it. 2008, I did vote for Obama. Did not vote for Obama in 2012. Voted third party. I think Libertarian. I'm not sure. I don't even really remember. This time around, voted third party. No regrets whatsoever. If my voting third party leads to the destruction of the country and possibly the world, then the world had it coming.
Oh.
Basically, I mean, honestly, I think if you can't vote your conscience, then what kind of a society is this anyway? And let it all burn. Honestly, let it happen. I mean, I'm going to vote the way I want to vote. I'm not going to vote for some corrupt, crooked, awful.
Her husband was already in power.
Condescending woman,
Queen Hillary,
who thought that she had it, who thought it was that it was basically just her turn and that she was entitled to it.
Well, it was the royals. They thought it was going to be a Bush versus a Clinton, and they think that this aristocratic, oligarchy of politician, political families and stuff can govern and be it. And then they got the outsider man, and it's pretty trippy to see how it's playing out. And
the power of television.
Well, and that's really what launched his career. He was really good at media activity and projecting himself even before he got his TV shows.
Yeah.
But then you go from reality TV to running the presidency and stuff.
And now we have Netflix and Hulu and YouTube. And that's basically the television of today. I'm a big fan of YouTube, obviously. You're watching this on YouTube.
Self-serving.
I have my own channel, and it's a fairly successful channel at this point, and anyone can do it. I'm surprised that not everybody does on a regular basis. I mean, and YouTube, I would say, is the one company of all of the social media giants. I would say that YouTube is the one who's the most committed to free speech. They're not perfect. They're far from perfect. But they're still better than Twitter, who permanently bans anyone that they don't like, even if it's not for a good reason. And Facebook, who constantly puts their users in timeout and sometimes shadow bans them. YouTube, at least, tends to be a little bit more committed to free speech, and I'm really happy to be a force on this medium. I have the second most successful YouTube channel of anyone I know in my local area. There are really only 3 people I know of in this area who have what I would call a successful channel. I'm surprised more people don't do it. But anyway,
well, you just want more competition, man.
Yeah. And then you have Netflix, which we just got done watching a Netflix show. You have Hulu, which I haven't messed around with as much.
Not a big fan of Hulu. I like Netflix, though.
Netflix pretty good. Yeah. HBO Go. A lot of documentaries on there about kind of one thing. If you watch HBO Go, you probably know what we're talking about. But yeah, entertainment's changed a lot, and it's become a lot more kind of democratic in some ways because on YouTube, if you're successful, you've pretty much earned your success. Everybody's on a fairly equal footing. There's still net neutrality. My channel is the very same size and dimensions as a really well-known famous person's
So
channel.
you're saying you get the equality of opportunity.
You get the equality of opportunity, yes, and your channel looks the same as anybody else's. You get that cover photo, same size, profile picture, same size. You can upload as many videos as you want. Everything is uniform, and you're kind of put on equal footing with people who have thousands and in some cases millions more subscribers than you.
Yeah.
And it's a cool thing. It also adds to the noise of the world. I'm not going to deny that. If everybody has the ability to express their opinion and shoot it out there and just jizz it all over the world.
Well, it's actually their slogan used to be "broadcast yourself." That's almost like "go fuck yourself."
Yeah, go broadcast yourself. just go vent. Just go vent about shit, and then just go and play video games like we know you're going to do because we know you're not going to actually. Yeah, just go and like a little toddler, go throw a little tantrum, and then take a nap or whatever. But no, it's good stuff, and if it is in my case, it is like having I've formatted my channel to be like a TV show. Basically, I have different series. It's like UHF. I come up with my own series. I put together playlists. I have a lot, and the series are fairly wide variety. I have a pool series. I have a series of video gameplay. I have a series that I'm contemplating doing about paper airplanes. I have one that I'm dash cams.
Yeah.
Dash cam videos.
History ones.
Series of that. History ones.
Tech stuff.
Documentaries. I have a playlist of just going through phone books and basically documentaries about phone books of specific places and times. And you can just come up with just random shit like that, which if you approached a TV executive, you'd be going right through the floor. They'd be opening that trap door, and you'd end up out on the studio walkway or whatever, on the other side of the studio gate.
So speaking of UHF 2, that's something that was fascinating in the 80s and 90s. That's really when UHF took off. Like Rupert Murdoch's company, Fox, not news, but the broadcast network, was really launched through cable because it was all on UHF frequencies that nobody really wanted, and they couldn't really broadcast it. Our KFXA station started, I think it was 32 years after the last commercial antenna license was granted. 53. It took until about 86 for another license to be granted, and that was KFXA.
Yeah. And, television, I mean, if we had to really kind of draw a line in the sand and kind of explain the difference between classic television, the way television works, and how more modern forms of entertainment work, is that one is non-interactive and one is interactive. Mm-hmm. That's really the one big difference, I would say, is that you watch television back in the day, you saw something you didn't like, you couldn't just go tweet about it or write about it on the network's Facebook page or whatever. You had to actually write an angry letter, and about 90% of people aren't going to do that. You pretty much, this is the entertainment that's being fed into your home, and you pretty much just kind of had to take it. And the only thing that TV stations were accountable for was I suppose Nielsen ratings, which I have been in Nielsen family a couple of times. I was a whole family at a couple of points in my life. Yeah, they mailed me. I think it was a $20 bill, and asked me to be a Nielsen family, and I did it. And that was really the only way. And they did respond. They did kind of angry letters did have a certain impact, but they were they didn't get as many of them, and they were kind of written off more often because you didn't get as many, and because
FCC regulations are the big deals too.
FCC, and the idea was that the idea back then was this person got so offended that they wrote a whole letter and sent it to us. This person's probably kind of a nut anyway.
Yeah.
Now everybody's a nut because everybody can post about all the shit that they don't like, and they can do it at a moment's notice on a whim. They don't even have to put any thought into it.
So it's an emotional decision, and a lot of times it isn't coherent. let's say you have a buddy of yours and you guys go play pool at an uppity town, and then they kind of treat your buddy like crap, and then you post a review about it. Maybe you don't write with the best English, and maybe it's not really coherent. But the thing that's important is that you told them what's right, and you got your message across.
Yeah. And nobody can argue that it's not effective. Unfortunately, it's all too effective. I mean, we've gotten to the point where, the mob can basically kind of control the mob kind of has power over the individual more than they should.
It's a collective. There's a book I had read called Who Owns the Future, and it's all about the collective mindset, not the individual talent, but the collectiveness of a lot of these social media technology, where it's the mind and the herd and that whole stuff, and they attack the individual and they go after people and they do a lot of things like that, where it's they just try to tear people apart and go that route. But really the thing too is television in a lot of ways is a passive media, a passive form. You turn it on, you turn it off. That's it. There's no feedback to it. Or with the phone or with Facebook or other things, there's two-way streets where you can say something, then somebody can respond to it, and it gives you more of those options.
Yeah. So anyway, kind of bringing things back around. I mean, this is the portable TV. This, if you were a kid in the '90s or even perhaps in the aughts, this was something that you probably really wanted because most kids were just addicted to television at the time. If you missed your favorite show after school, you missed it. There was no looking it up on the computer, no like TiVoing it or whatever on your digital TV. If you missed a show, you missed a show. I mean, maybe you could get your mom to tape it for you. Maybe you could set the timer on the VCR. Sometimes that didn't work right. I knew how to operate a VCR like basically by the time I was 4, and I was pretty much a master at it. But sometimes you set the recording timer thing on the VCR, and sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. Sometimes that was your fault. Sometimes it was just some kind of weird mistake.
One other thing that I was going to say with the DVR and the VCR recorder, one of your first videos, dude, was about PBS.
Yes.
And that's something that I'm very passionate about. And Mr. Rogers was one of the main reasons why VCR is how it is. Because he was very adamant, and he went in front of Congress in the 80s to say, a lot of little boys and girls just aren't able to watch my program when it's broadcast. And Mr. Rogers would be kind of sad.
Yeah, because sometimes it was broadcast at like 2 p.m. or some weird time.
Yeah, where the kids couldn't really watch it.
Like 5 a.m. I remember that. I remember, especially in the later days of Mr. Rogers, which Mr. Rogers isn't even on TV anymore. It's some weird like Daniel Tiger spin-off show. They don't even air those classic episodes anymore, and it's really a shame.
15 years ago was when he retired and died or whatever.
Yeah, and back in the like just in the last few years, they did have it on PBS. Like they did air it, but they always aired it at weird times of day where nobody would watch it. It's just, I don't know, you could probably find it online. You can find, just like you can find anything online, you could probably like download the entire series of Mr. Rogers if you really looked for it. But
Iowa Public Television actually only broadcast from 5 a.m. in the morning till about midnight at night. They shut down.
It used to be 24 hours. I remember that too.
They
and that happened also around the same time that digital TV came out.
Yeah,